The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This is a very special episode as it is the first episode I've recorded in over a year. And like most of you, the pandemic brought many challenges and I had to step away from the podcast and a few other things. But pandemic has also brought gifts, changes that were good, despite how difficult it has been. And I'm especially honored to be back today and to be marking this return with a trusted colleague and friend, Mari Grande, who will be talking with us about the experience of being a daughter of a critical mother and the work that she has done in this area and how she supports clients and therapists and the resources she's created. And for those of you who have listened for a long time, you're aware that this topic is near and dear to my heart, personally and professionally, as I work with women who have experienced childhood trauma. And being a daughter of a critical mother has clear, profound, and far-reaching consequences. Something I feel we all know intuitively, but now this is supported by research on attachment and the impact of trauma on the brain. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome Mari. Mari is a New York City-based licensed creative arts therapist, clinical social worker, thought leader, educator, and coach with more than 20 years of experience in trauma healing and recovery. By working closely with the mind-body connection, attachment theory, and the power of creativity, she draws upon her integrative background to alleviate the impacts of relational and generational trauma. Mari's passionate about working with women who have experienced a mother wound and offers various online courses that provide guidance, support, and insight through the Overcoming the Mother Wound program. Hi, Mari, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Lourdes. I am so happy to be here.
I am so happy that you're here with me today and being a part of my return to the podcast. Yeah. And when you and I had connected earlier this year, it just felt right. And it felt like a way to be supported coming back also with you, because I have a lot of respect for the work you do. I know your heart. You're beautiful in and out. And so thank you for being with me as I transition back into the podcast space.
Yeah, that makes it a special treat as well. I love your energy, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Back in, I'm not even sure what year it was, but it was episode 21. I had Bethany Webster on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
And the title of the episode was Healing the Mother Wound.
Mm.
And she spoke about how she understands and defines the mother wound. And then she also came back a few years later to extend the conversation. However, I've always felt that that episode and the mother wound is a core aspect of this podcast. And for, I would say, most women, if not all to some degree. So I am very excited to hear about your work.
Yes, thank you. And I am familiar with Bethany Webster, and she also brings up that the mother wound is not only for women, but also for men as well. But I have decided, because of the way it developed for me, to focus on mothers and daughters.
So this is a natural segue into my first question, which is, how did you find yourself working in this area of the mother wound, which you have started to allude to already, and then more specifically into daughters of critical mothers?
Right, sure. As you know, I'm in private practice, And I was seeing people in person until the pandemic happened. And when I was seeing people in person, I noticed there was a consistent sort of longing with my clients, and there was a theme. I work with a lot of attachment wounds, but there was something specific happening with the women that I was seeing. And I had one or two men, but it was so many women that this was happening to. And I was talking about it with one particular woman client that she, in exasperation, she said, because she was doing really great work, but she kept on falling back. We do work, she'd fall back. And she says, isn't there like a group that I can join? Because we talked about supplementing it, our work. And she said, isn't there a group for daughters of critical mothers? And I said, oh, let me look into that. And so I actually researched it. I was looking for it, and then it wasn't coming up again. I wasn't finding what she was looking for. Then it dawned on me, like, well, wait a minute. Why can't I do that? At the same time, I had other women struggling with their relationship. It was, adult women, mothers that were still haunted by the patterns that they learned from their own mothers, and they couldn't seem to break free. And we talked about it, and we were doing psychoeducation, and we were doing role play. We were doing a lot of different modalities, and it just felt like a lot of heavy lifting. And I've since learned that the features that a daughter of a critical mother have, which include shame, self-doubt, self-criticism, all and on, were, once they come together as a group, that it's healed or it's lightened. And I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me go back and just start with when that woman said, isn't there a group? So I asked some other clients in my practice that had this same theme in their lives, and they're very interested, but we couldn't find a time that coordinated with everyone. And then the pandemic happened. So everything went online, and suddenly schedules opened up and were more flexible. So that is the silver lining for me of the pandemic, is that I was able to form this group and the healing that began. So that's how it all started. I'm pretty well dated. Like March of 2020, that's when we all began. And then people in the group, they bonded and they were going really deep into the material. I was doing a lot of art therapy, guided meditations. Also, they were my clients, so they knew how I work, which is I use like a multimodal approach where I bring in certain prompts, whether it's art therapy or writing or some somatic work. And they gotten to a certain point where there's this understanding we would have a certain way of entering the group space, and there was a trust that was being built. So when people started asking, can I join the group, or they knew about the group, and I wasn't able to feel like, okay, you just jump right in. I felt there need to be sort of a initiation.
Right.
So that's when I decided to develop courses. So I developed a course, and then from the course, people would join the group.
So, Mari, one of the things that I'm curious about in terms of your work with daughters of critical mothers are, especially when working with trauma, there are a lot of similarities as far as responses to trauma and behaviors that we see. Was there anything that was unique to you that you noticed when it came to daughters of critical mothers that was different from other clients you worked with who had experienced trauma, or maybe just what you knew about the field?
Yeah, well, it's really hard to tease out. Something that the telltale sign is an inability to self-soothe.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it was helping them, teaching them resources, and an invitation to an inner life that was often disorganized or repelled against, and just making that invitation sort of into their own womb space so that they can, learn to almost mother themselves. And that perhaps is how come the focus has been just with working with the daughters, because it's a very direct connection, and women can can get it easier because they do have that different connection to the body. And I hate to make blanket statements like this because I've worked with men who are able to very tuned into that part of themselves. But overall, I guess I just kind of decided to work within my own capacity. I just like, okay, this is all I can do
Yeah.
and be effective doing it.
I think that's so beautiful that this process for you with your clients and also in the groups that you lead are that this is a turning inward, right? It's a invitation to go inside, which when you look at this mother wound, the wounding is around being soothed and being reassured and being comforted and that sense of
Right. It's like,
whatever I'm feeling, whatever is happening and I'm noticing that it's real and I can trust that versus with a lot of trauma, so much time is spent on scanning what's outside of you to stay somewhat safe and to be able to read the room and to respond to the outer world in the way they want you to respond. So this process of, which I think is connected again to that self-doubt.
right.
If your point of reference for love, comfort, safety, security is outside of you, it's very hard to recognize your inner voices, your intuition,
Absolutely.
right? That sense of this is what my heart is telling me, my soul, my anger, my sadness,
Right.
right?
Exactly. And our intuition is such an important part of our essence. And one of the most harmful, in my experience, pieces of the wounding is that not being seen, not being felt. It's just this, and it's this absence. And that is one of the wounds, one of the mother wounds, is that absent mother. There's other ones too. There's the attacking one, just the overwhelming one. But that's where the soul work lies. And this work, it is, we are reconnecting to who we are. So I can't help but bring in a spiritual element to the work. And I find that's the women that I've worked with that are open to that work seem to benefit a lot.
Mari, when you were sharing the significance of not being seen, and of course, there are other forms of attachment wounds, that happen, which seem more, I would say, readily identifiable or overt, like the attacking
Mm-hmm.
mother. And I know for me, as in my work with clients and for myself, the not being seen, the not being attuned to, that not being known and whatever is going on with you being reflected back to you, that is a huge psychological injury.
Yeah.
It is big. And it's one of those where it doesn't seem like that at first.
Right.
And even I know for my clients, often it's hard at first for them to see how profound that is. So I just wanted to comment on that. That's what I thought of when you shared that.
Yeah. And what makes it so hard is that it's so hard to identify.
Yeah.
And it's often missed. And even with the attacking mother wound, for instance, embedded in that is also that not being seen, not being felt.
Yes.
That's missed as well. And then there's people that they don't have the attacking mother, so it's really confusing. Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong here? I got everything.
Yeah.
But then there's this subtle little something's absent, something's missing, something is askew. Yeah, it's devastating to witness the adult daughter.
Mari, what are some additional indicators that a woman has experienced a disruptive relationship with their mother? I know that you said that one of the big ones is the inability to self soothe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had mentioned also that the self doubt and shame are there.
Yeah.
Mari, could you please share how might a woman actually experience this mother wound, being the daughter of a critical mom, what this could look like and feel like in her experience?
Yeah, such a great question. Wow, where to begin? For one thing, there's a sense of self doubt when it comes to making a decision like, do I know best? or when they do something like, oh, I did, oh, it was so bad. I just had a crappy job. Just a lot of meanness towards themselves and just not trusting who they are. And there's a lot of different types of mother wounds. Some who are not aware of a mother wound might have what we call defenses and just think that whatever they do is the best. No doubt, no nothing. Although in the quiet moments, there can be this feeling of, well, actually, maybe not. They just like that's when you might see substance abuse, where they're stuffing their feelings, they're drinking away their feelings, or a lot of sexing their feelings. It's a bit of avoidance. And if you look at attachment styles, you can see there's certain parallels between the wounds and the attachment styles, the insecure attachment styles.
Can you share a little bit about what attachment styles are for our guests who may not be sure about that?
Sure. I think of Mary Main and John Bowlby's work. That's where there's secure, and where Donald Winnicott would say, well, they got a good enough parent. And then, which means when the child would go away and they'd come back, the parent is there. They know that someone's always going to be there no matter what. Then there's the anxious ambivalent, where they're not sure what's going to be next, or is that real? There's the avoidant, and the avoidant usually happens, as you know, where maybe the child isn't given enough attention, so they just learn to avoid, because if I seek attention, it's just going to hurt, so I'm just going to avoid. And then there's a disorganized. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're sad. It's very disorganized. So that is my 2-minute education about attachment.
And then you were saying that you see a parallel between the attachment style and the defenses, or the way that the woman responds to the world based on how she experienced attachment growing up.
Absolutely. For instance, with the anxious ambivalent, they could have like an attacking or someone who's absent. It could be a mix of the attacking and absent type of mother. And disorganized usually goes with the overbearing. I'm finding that it's a combination. Just like if you think of your attachment style, we sometimes feel secure, sometimes we feel avoidant, sometimes we're anxious. It's on a spectrum.
Right.
And so is the wounding.
This makes sense that for you, when you were saying that what you see is this inability to self soothe, because for all of these style attachments, besides secure, they haven't experienced a safe, responsive, comforting, reassuring response from their mother.
Yes, in a consistent, reliable way.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned earlier about the good enough parenting, the good enough mother and father, because I think a lot of us can start to feel like, oh, I just have messed this up completely with my own children, or even if you're seeing, what you've gone through, it seems really hard. You think about, like you said, how do I respond consistently in the best way? And we actually don't have to do it all the time.
Right.
So can you share a little bit about the good enough parent?
Well, we're not perfect. We are human, and that's part of being a good parent, is letting your offspring or the other people in your life know that you're human. So when you make a mistake, you say, I made a mistake. If you hurt someone, like, did that hurt your feelings? I'm so sorry. And that back and forth with a caretaker and a child builds certain relational patterns. And I think of rupture and repair. So just like when you break a bone, when that bone heals and it's mended, that bone, that break is going to be stronger than the other part of that bone. And that's a metaphor that I like to use when it comes to a rupture and a repair in a relationship. If say you failed a class and your mother gets very angry at you. Why did you do that? How could you do that? And then, of course, the child is crushed, and it's a horrible thing that just happened. And then the mother comes back to the child a few minutes later and says, I am so sorry. I lost my temper. I shouldn't have done that, because I'm sure you tried your best, or you tell me what happened. You tell me what happened, and really start a conversation. And even though that the mother might have done something really mean, it's coupled with reflection and communication and repair.
That's a great metaphor, Mari. I like that one. I'm going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah, the same areas where maybe there is some hurt,
Hmm.
mistakes, that these can actually become very strong areas with the way that we respond to those.
Exactly.
And I can see how this is part of that self soothing, because one of the things you shared was that with daughters of critical mothers, there's also that being incredibly hard on themselves.
Absolutely. There's no relief. That's what we work on is alternatives, ways to find relief, ways to find resources, not to ignore it, but how to repair it within, not going outside and getting an ice cream cone, although that can be nice
Yeah.
too, but that's not how you repair it.
I love this because what it also shows us, when we're able to see this, is that the areas that we struggle with the most, where we feel maybe we're the hardest on ourselves or the most stuck, that these are actually potentials for really building a strong foundation with your recovery. This can become,
I love
you
that.
know,
Hmm.
because it's that spot, using that metaphor you shared, we're going to respond to this injury and we're going to do what we need to do to strengthen, rehabilitate, and it becomes stronger.
Right. And it's like those tender spots. You know where they are because they're so tender. So you're able to access them. It's like, so let's access them. Let's not run away from them, but let's like, how can we make this feel better? Or how can we make this not ignored?
Yeah. So I know that you also provide support for therapists, for clinicians. And I was curious about what is it about daughters of critical mothers and their healing process that is important to know and to pay attention to. What are the considerations that you take into account when you're sitting with a client, because therapy is not the same for everyone, and especially for daughters of critical mothers. What do therapists should pay attention to, or where is it important to build some awareness?
Yes. Just thinking about this workshop I just did for this topic. And one of the hardest but most valuable is using your countertransference
Mm,
because these women need to be felt, they need to be seen, and they know how to hide. It
yeah,
wasn't safe to be seen, heard, felt. So that is one of the first things that we talk about. And then, of course, knowing about attachment and being able to identify what's going on so that you're not lost in the woods.
yeah. I love how you said that they know how to hide.
Hmm.
And I think that is the perfect description for me. Some of my clients who have experienced the most trauma in terms of their mothers, they can look really good on paper, if that
Yes.
makes sense, right?
Oh, yes. High achieving, accomplished.
Yeah. And also, it's the way that they have learned to be safe and to be loved has gotten them far in terms of, like you said, they're often high achieving, successful.
Hmm.
They are dependable, responsible women who usually are doing too much for everyone.
Yeah.
It made me think about something that happens sometimes with my clients. And it's when there's this sense that they feel like they're really doing a lot better and maybe they can pull back a little from therapy.
Right.
But, I remember just often in these situations, just addressing that and what that wanting to pull back is about. And sometimes it is appropriate, but often it's a hiding. And it's usually because we're getting to some tender places, like you
Right.
said.
Exactly. And then you have the women that are the opposite, that they either they had it and they lost it, and
Yeah.
that's quite a theme, and some that just can't get it because there's this belief that they're just not worth it. So again, we're back to that spectrum.
Right.
And what you just said about thinking, well, the pulling back when we start to get to something can happen to anyone, whether they're high achieving, low achieving. But I think if we're going to stay with talking about the women that look great on paper,
Yeah.
that is the most challenging. That is
Yeah.
really, really challenging. And I think also, again, trusting your countertransference, trusting your intuition, because even though they've got all this stuff that looks great and is great, they're still coming to you for a reason.
Yeah.
They're still wanting something and staying within your own ground to pick up on what you do, what you can give them, because they're there, they want something. They're wanting to heal, even though it hurts.
And I think too, with these women, these high achieving, successful women, it's also very difficult for them to receive support or to acknowledge that they need support. And so the therapy encounter can feel very unsafe in that way,
Yes.
very foreign to be held, to be responded to be seen.
Yes. And I have to say, when you said that it's really hard to receive, that I have found across the board, no matter high, low, achieving, non-achieving, successful, unsuccessful, that the ability to receive is the most challenging. And there's something different about taking versus receiving, to really be able to take it in and appreciate what they're doing, their own work in this healing space, to be able to acknowledge that. That is very transformative in my experience, and one of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah. And when you say about this taking versus receiving,
Mm.
can you give me an example of that, or what that could look like for a client?
Yeah, just taking would be maybe wanting to change their time all the time, wanting to, oh, I shouldn't have to pay for that because I really had something important to do. That would be more of a taking, especially in group, because in the group you pay whether you're there or not. And in wanting to take, almost like break the container a bit,
Mm,
which is something they need a container, but they need to push against something. So that would be
yeah.
more of kind of a taking, attacking. Let's see, another example of a taking would be just wanting, like having, like I offer a lot of resources, and nothing's wrong with taking the resources, but then not applying them.
Mm,
Just like,
right,
oh,
right.
oh, give me some more. So, well, what about the ones, we just were using? Oh, yeah, I can't find them.
Right, right. Or even I would say when you have taught them certain strategies for calming their bodies or their tools that they have, and then asking if they're using them, but they're not.
Right. Yeah, thanks for naming that one.
Well, that's just one that I noticed like that happens. It's just wanting more tools, but they're not using the tools that we've gone over, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, okay, wait a minute. You mean I have to do something here?
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because that comes up so much. Or again, going back to what you were saying about the countertransference is, well, are you doing the diaphragmatic breathing? No, I'm not.
Hmm.
Okay. Are you doing the guided imagery? Are you
Hmm.
taking walks? Are you doing these yoga poses? And it's just wanting support and wanting help, but not utilizing the support and help that they're getting.
Yeah. And honestly, when you say that, I feel my heart like goes out, because I feel like some just really need to do it in the presence of another person. They're
Yeah.
not enough to do it alone. So an incredible amount of compassion and
Yeah.
empathy is required.
Absolutely. And again, when that's part of the self-soothing, that's part of the response that they didn't get,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's amazing though, that even though you have these women that cannot give to themselves in a group, they are the most generous, kind, warm people to others.
Right.
It just blows me away. And members are able to receive from each other.
Mm,
Even, I think it's sometimes even more than me, more than they
yeah.
can from me. Because there's something about being in it together that
Yeah.
is really, really solid.
So if there's someone who is listening who is feeling that she may be one of these women who is a daughter of a critical mother,
Mm.
what are your words of wisdom for her? What would you suggest for her as far as taking those next steps?
Well, if you're listening, welcome. You are not alone, and there is help. There's a lot of resources out there now, and the worst thing you can do is to not reach out, whether to a friend, a therapist, a coach. There's a lot, even some books, if that's your thing. And of course, I have my programs that I'd be happy to share with you. But yeah, please not hide.
I like that. Please don't hide. And hiding can look, not what we think necessarily. Hiding in plain sight, I would say, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's people that show up to my programs and they still hide. And that's
Yeah.
okay because that's where they are right now.
Yeah. So, Mari, can you share what some of your resources are for anyone who's listening who's looking for some support or just want to learn more about how you work?
Sure. So I have actually two different websites. I have the marigrande.com, which is my therapy website. And if you are in California, New York, New Jersey, or Florida, I am able to see you. I'm licensed in those states. So that's for therapy, and that you can learn about the different types of therapies that I do there. Then there is my creative healing integration website. And that is the one that I house my courses. And I have a program. I've renamed it now. It is called Overcoming the Mother Wound. And in that program, I have different courses. I have my Daughters of Critical Mothers courses. And the courses, I have three different versions. And I will be creating more courses, but right now I have these three courses. The main one is an 11-week, 10 module course, and anybody can take that from anywhere. And that one has live support. I see you every other week with the group. It has a special membership site for the people taking the course. And then there's these modules that are dropped weekly. And if you go to my creative healing integration.com site and go to Overcoming the Mother Wound, you will see the different options of courses. There's that 11-week, and then I have a foundations course, which is much shorter, and that is if you want to join the therapy group. So that's if you live in New York, New Jersey, California, or Florida. And that's an abbreviated course to prepare you to join the therapy group. And then there's the foundations course, which is a self-study where it's 9 weeks, and it has the information from the other courses, but it's presented in a self-study way. So there's some video and audio of myself assisting in places and optional coaching support if needed.
So, there's really something for everyone everywhere,
Right,
right?
right,
Yes, those are, I love that you have all of those options because really there's something for everyone wherever they are on their journey
right.
and literally wherever they are geographically,
Yeah.
also. Also, Mari, is there anything that you have that, for someone who maybe isn't really quite sure if, am I high functioning? Am I doing great? Or am I perhaps maybe something else is going on?
Yeah. I do have a quiz on the website. It's a mother wound quiz to find out the level. Do I have a mother wound? And if so, what type do I have? And that's a freebie on my website. And there's also I have a couple other freebies. The other one is that I recommend for daughters of critical mothers is the mandala moment, and it takes you through an exercise that's very similar to one of the exercises in the course, because the course actually it's very experiential. So there's a lot of art making, there's guided meditations, there's even some movement, writing prompts. So it's not just you sit down and read. It's not like that, because I'm really not like that either. So,
And so we'll make sure to include links to your websites. And that way, listeners who are interested in working with you or just learning more about
yeah,
how you work can find you and connect with you.
sure. And if I can't help them, I can certainly direct them to some other resources that might be helpful.
Mari, thank you so much for sitting with me today and sharing this information. It's so important, so needed, and really it affects more people than I think most people realize. This is not something, it's very common, I would say.
It's amazing. And there's so much to go into about this whole topic because we're talking about, because it's not just the mother wound, it's the attachment, and the attachment goes on through our lifespan and through our relationships, our romance, our friendships, our children. And then there's also and we talk about this in the course. I'm sorry, getting off a little off topic,
No, you're fine.
but about the transmission, the intergeneral transmission of trauma, how we can heal that by healing ourselves. And we can't do anything about what happened, but we can do about what's going to happen. So that's why I feel even more passionate about this work, because we are not just helping ourselves, but we are helping the people around us and future generations.
Absolutely. One of the things with trauma, that it is that gift that keeps on giving. It is,
Right.
however, it can also be a healing gift. And I think that it benefits the world.
Absolutely. And I value my own traumas because I've learned so much. I feel like it's even deepened me as a human being.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be ashamed about trauma.
Well, going back again to your metaphor that you use, which I love about, having a broken bone. And when you go back and you repair and you nurture and you tend to that wound, it becomes a place of strength. And it reminds me of a quote by Rumi. I put it at the front of my dissertation, and it goes something like, "The wound is where light enters us."
Yes. I love that.
So again, Mari, thank you so much for being here with me today and for being with me as I transition back into podcasting.
Yay.
I'm glad to share this with you, and I'm very excited to share our conversation with the world.
Thank you again for inviting me, Lourdes. It's been lovely. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting Women in Depth with a one-time or recurring donation. Any amount is appreciated and helps us continue to provide free, quality content for the world. If donating resonates with you, you can find the donation link on today's show notes. You can also follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.